The last few days working on this project kind of turned into a bit of a grind, which is a good indication to recalibrate. So, you know, some parts of a project are gonna be a little arduous and other parts are a lot more enjoyable. You just gotta remember, I'm doing this for fun, take the good with the bad, and continue on. I think all that is mostly, at least, behind me, and there's some really satisfying results. I can operate the pedal, and the return spring all the way back there on the clutch is enough to easily get this to come back up. So I know I'm in pretty good shape there. The brake, all I have installed is the master cylinder, but I bench bled it and it's nice and firm. I expect that to change a little bit when I hook up the lines and all that stuff, but that's coming. The accelerator is just sitting there, and the cable is installed, but I'm waiting on those parts. We already checked out the shifter, and I'm already really happy with that, which is great. And this, oh, butter smooth. Okay. I will take it. Really, none of it is totally complete, except for maybe the shifter. Something else that's really satisfying is this. I almost forgot about it. These things came in. These are actually the bleed valve caps, but I'm going to use them as zerk fitting covers, or zerk caps. They'll work good for that. I got a dozen of them because these splitty buses have a gazillion zerks. Say that real fast. They have a bunch of zerk fittings on the front end, and I just added one more with that pivot pin for the e-brake. So let's put these in place. This will be kind of fun. Easy, fast, get to put some new parts on a thing, and that'll be cool. You know, I'm gonna have to go look in my stash for more of these. I'm gonna run out. I'm gonna be short by 2. Used up a dozen of these quick. Now I can finally put the brakes back on the vehicle. I'm gonna start here on the rear brakes and then move up front and get them in place. And that'll really be cool because I can start messing around with the brake system itself, like bleeding the brake system and the hydraulic side of all of this. It'll be nice to have that sussed out. I replaced both rears with ones that I had in my stash for the double cab, and they're actually kind of old, so this will be interesting. I'm gonna reuse the fronts that I went through and cleaned up. So we'll see if they've still got some life in them. You know, this stuff just doesn't like to sit, so it could be that I have multiple issues once I put some pressure on the braking system, but that's why we're gonna go through it and check all that stuff out. And then we'll just go from there, right? So won't take any chances. If there's any kind of a problem, like a leak, or the pedal is not firm as it should be, then we'll address it. Just gonna see if we can make that happen with most of the parts that we started with. Now the first step is gonna be putting the seals in these bearing caps. There's a theme here. A lot of these bearing caps have an oil slinger, which is just like a fender washer or like a big wide washer that when it spins, the oil that finds its way to it gets slung off into the cap and drains out of that drain hole on the bottom. But this one did not have oil slingers. I wanted to make sure of that. So I went back and reviewed the video that I shot of pulling everything apart and freeze framed it. And sure enough, there is no oil slinger washer thingy. Here they are in the kit. There's, oh boy, now I did it. So I slung the slinger. Here's one of the slung slingers for some kind of a model. That guy's a little rusty. Here's a seal that's important. This goes in a cap of some models. This is obviously, wow, that's big. That is ridiculous. Holy moly. All right, here's the other slung slinger. Neither one of these slung slingers fits this big nut transmission, meaning the axle is real thick and a big nut goes on there. It's supposed to come all the way back here, right? And this one doesn't fit either. So there is no oil slinger. Now I thought, well, okay, what provides that function, right? Why would some of them need an oil slinger and other ones not? I think it's this. So this is like this, and this goes in like that. All right, do you see it now? This is the oil slinger. It goes in like that. I feel reasonably comfortable that I've got one of those models that doesn't have the little washer thingy thing. It just does it a different way. The reason to make sure of that now is that the oil slinger, if one is necessary for a particular model, it has to go in there before you put the seal in. If you put the seal in without it, if you forget the oil slinger, you have to destroy the seal to get it back out, get new seals, put the oil slinger in there like you should have the first time, and then put your new seal back in. I think I'm all good. This one actually will slip in after the fact, so I don't have to have this in there beforehand. So let's get these seals in place, and then we can move on to assembling the backing plate and all the other good things, building all the way out to the drums today. Pretty much able to do this with my hands now that I've greased it up a little bit. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm using different brands of rear wheel seal kits for each side just to do kind of a comparison. This one's called a CNC. They're being presented as the high quality alternative. So I grabbed 2 of these. I wanted a set of spares, right? I also grabbed 2 of just the one that has plain old packaging. And so far I'm not really telling a difference in their quality level, but not always are the differences visible. We'll see how they are in function. This is the CNC one over here. This seal seems marginally stiffer than this seal. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not so sure. It just seems to be a little bit more firm rubber. Other than that, I haven't really seen much difference. He's fighting me a little bit. That's probably good. Okay, here's a plate that I've used for something. He's a little bent up, but appears to be an appropriate size. Want to make sure that the seal is bottomed out all the way to its shoulder, which you see a gap here, but the shoulder is underneath the seal. I can compare it to this one that I haven't done yet. See, there's a little bit of space here. All right, so here's the one that I've still got to press in so that I get this seal all the way up to its shoulder. I'm gonna check all the way around here. I'm gonna go in a little more right there. Okay, cool. Which side goes which, right? You always want the lip, like the open side of your seal, to face towards the oil you're trying to keep in. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit of this here, just so the seal's not dry. I think before I put the backing plate on, I'm gonna knock out this. Need to put the short metal line back in that goes between this T here and this bracket, and then I want to put in the new rubber line that comes to here, and I'll stop there. Once I have the backing place in, then I'll put the metal line that goes from here through this little hole here and a new grommet and into the wheel cylinder. While I'm up here, I see that I goofed. I haven't gotten that Bowden tube seal yet, but I'll need to pull this back out to install that seal here. But that's all right. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. This metal line is going to need some shaping and some bending and so on. This is the one that we made our own clippy clip. This line was zip tied in this general area. Bad, bad, bad. So now we've got our proper clip in here. We'll play around with the shape of this line and get it just right for the location of the wheel cylinders. I'm gonna take this out for now, and we'll come back to this once we have the brakes in place. Unless I've forgotten something, this is what I'll need to get started. These seals, one for each side of the backing plate. So this will go up against the reduction gearbox, and this will go on our side of the backing plate. You don't use these on other models that don't have reduction gearboxes. Of course, the splitties do, so this will go on the other side. This is a little O-ring dilly-doo that will go on the axle. All right, so once I have all of this in place, I'll slide this over the axle, and then I'll put the spacer in place. And then we'll start looking at brakes. In all the time that I've been doing stuff like this, I still have not settled on my sealant, like the stuff that I like to use for whatever. I've used a lot of this. I'm gonna try it here. I've used the silicone gray stuff, used the high temp, the red stuff. Haven't settled on my favorite sealant. So if you want to drop a comment, what would be your favorite sealant for the rear axle seal? All right, let's put some sealant on here. Things coming together like this. I remember making the decision, do I just clean it up and put it back on there, or do I, take it all apart, do the paint? And while it's taken me some time, I think overall I'm happier having done it this way. This is the sealing surface here for that seal. I put a little bit of grease on the seal. I put a little bit of grease here too, just to be sure. I want this to slide in nice and easy and not burn up when we first run the bus. Actually, while I'm at it, I'm gonna do one more thing. Back up. I had to use that homemade puller to get this thing out of there, and that's just not as graceful as I'd like it to be. So I'm gonna try a little bit of this, a little bit of anti-seize, which there was some on there and it did not appear to work as well as one would hope, but I'm going to try it again. So just a little bit of anti-seize here. Now this is going to be all over me very soon. Oh, I almost forgot. If I mess this up, oil goes all over everything, and it all has to be cleaned up again. I'd like to avoid that if I could. I'm gonna try and remember stuff like this. Kinda wish I'd put this on before I put this on. So I'm gonna have to get it all the way back in there. Try and get this back in there without damaging it here. Ultimately, this will be sealed when the drum is in place and fully tightened. Until then, if I topped off this gearbox could leak out and make a big mess. So a few things on the future to-do list, but for now, let's finish assembling the brakes. This is 46 millimeters. That's why they call it a big nut transmission. Ta-da! A thing. This is a thing that does stuff. I don't have a torque wrench that goes to 216 foot-pounds or 250 or whatever it is that people like to torque these things to. But I do know how much I weigh. This is an 18-inch slide bar, which gives it 1.5 feet, right? So whatever weight that I put on the very end of this will be 1.5 times that amount of torque. If I stand on the end of this slide bar, that gets me over the 216 or whatever it is. So I don't know that I'm comfortable doing that right now. I don't want to knock this thing off the jack stands, but I can get it pretty snug. I'm going to stop there and do a full tightening of it when I have it on the ground, the e-brake on, and it can't fall. For bleeding the brakes, I'm going to want to adjust these shoes tight, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Alright, that's pretty tight. I'll stick with that. Let's finish up this brake line thing. So we have to get this brake line to go comfortably from here through this hole and into that wheel cylinder. It should be pretty close, but it's not quite perfect. Here is where we see it's not quite where it needs to be. Let's see if we can do this without disturbing the arrangement down here, because I like that. Okay, we're close, but what I'd like to do is have it thread comfortably in and out and end up passing right through the middle of that hole. So we're real close. Now, right or wrong, I've started putting some of this on the threads in the hopes that it doesn't seize up quite as bad as sometimes they do. And on the tubing itself. This is the stuff that you lube a master cylinder or wheel cylinder seal with. I'm trying this out. Maybe this is something that people do. Maybe I'm making a big mistake. I don't know. But you gotta try stuff, right? This bus is getting really close to being a roller, but we've got a couple more things to do before we pass that milestone. On the way there, we'll make a new tool, modify the wheel cylinders, finish the brakes, and a few other things. There's a lot of cool stuff on the way, so subscribe now and I'll see you in the next one.